Thanks everyone for joining in this evening. This is our second YSPN webinar for the year. And this one is an alternative to careers. And we have a special guest here, Captain Amrinder Singh Ghuman, who is a captain in the Australian Defence Force. And we're here to basically talk about his life experiences, his journey, leadership within the ADF, as well as next steps. So welcome, Amrinder.
Hey, thank you so much for this opportunity. Looking forward to it.
No problems. So I guess we should start off with your choice to even go into the ADF. Now, I guess in the benefit of cultural context, Sikhs in the military seems like a natural progression, but I haven't come across too many Sikhs in Australia that decided to go into the military. So what inspired you to pick this career path?
So there was a couple of reasons I wanted to join. The first reason was I wanted to do civil engineering, and the Australian Defence Force Academy provided an opportunity to study something I was really interested in. The reason I ended up going down the Australian Army pathway was it gave me the opportunity to travel a less traveled path where I got the opportunity to move away from home, develop certain leadership skills, and really practice them daily. So that's why I really ended up going down the Army pathway. And then the final point was I think ideologically, I've always been interested to know whether I had what it takes to lead in very stressful situations, whether I had the same mettle that inspired our forefathers since Guru Nanak Dev Ji all the way on, the leaders that we venerate. So I really wanted to test myself and see if I had that same blood coursing through my veins.
So would you describe your childhood as being very directed? Is this what the motivation was to go to a place that tells you exactly what to do at what time?
No, not really. I think it was like any other Punjabi person's household. But I guess it wasn't as big a culture shock going to the army, that's for sure. Growing up, it was getting yelled at by mum for not waking up on time, and then you get into uniform and you get yelled at by a sergeant for not making your bed properly. So it wasn't a culture shock, that's for sure.
Okay, fair enough. In terms of challenges when you actually joined the ADF, so let's go back a few steps. So you joined ADFA, that's correct, and you did your engineering degree at UNSW.
Yeah, yep. Correct. So the Australian Defence Force Academy ADFA is a campus of UNSW. So it's down in Canberra, but I guess the staff are all UNSW's teaching staff.
Yep. And so from that, from ADFA, you went into Duntroon, the military college. And so did you experience any particular challenges you found as a Sikh, particularly one that's wearing a turban, in terms of what you discovered at ADFA and the diversity there, and Duntroon as well, and how they managed that?
When it comes to the formal rules and the like, there was no overt hurdles that I needed to overcome. So when I talk about that, I'm talking about wearing a pug, growing your facial hair. For me, it wasn't ever a problem because as they had developed the Australian Army's dress manual, they'd really copy pasted a lot of it from the British Army. So thanks to my predecessors, I was able to fit in to the Australian Army's regulations quite easily. But it was quite challenging being a Sikh in the more informal or intangible sense, where I grew up in Glenwood in Sydney, so it's a very multicultural environment. So even though you do face your challenges growing up, you're still kind of on your home ground. But moving to Canberra was challenging because you realize how different physically you are compared to everyone. So, and I think it was more exaggerated by the sense of in that post 9/11 world where a brown man with the turban is not really celebrated. So the challenge in all that was kind of figuring out who I was, and what value I brought to the organization, what value I brought to the community. And I don't think I've fully solved that just yet, but it forced me to think about who I was and what I stood for. So that was the more internal challenge that I had to really overcome or continue to overcome.
So you feel like as an organization, the Defence Force in general is quite welcoming to having diversity within its ranks?
Yeah. So I think it makes every effort to welcome the cross section of our community, society, Australian society. But I think we have to continue to help certain members in really flourishing, thriving rather than just surviving.
Sure. If you just go back a moment to your decision, so was it that you entered university with intent of doing engineering, and at what point did you decide, well, ADFA is a path forward?
So I made that decision back in year 12. So I hadn't really done any, I guess, civilian university. It was straight after graduating high school that December. On January the 20th, I was marching into the Australian Defence Force Academy in uniform.
Okay, wonderful. Now, in terms of historical context and such forth, did you have any? Well, we of course know, the formation of the Khalsa, and the reason for that, and sort of the military historical reason that Sikhs joined the military, and then of course it goes all the way up until World War I and World War II onwards. So, do you have any members of your family in recent history that served, that came as your inspiration?
In the immediate family would be my Nanaji, who was a soldier in the Indian Army, and I'm led to believe he fought in the 70s for India. But in a general sense, there wasn't really an overall military tradition in my immediate family. But I'm sure, like your family and many of those who are listening, were surrounded in the extended family with Singhs and Kaurs who are serving in the Indian Army. So although not immediate, I was surrounded by a great respect for the armed forces.
That's wonderful. So I understand you've also been involved with Sikh Youth Australia for a long time. So you've been an attendee, you've been facilitating workshops over years. So to what extent do you feel that community has played a part in your success?
I think it's been critical. So there's what it's done for me and what it's helped me kind of give back. So Sikh Youth Australia, so the annual Sikh camps were important because it helped me maintain my connection with Sikhi as I was growing up. So I not only got to learn about Sikhi, but I also got to stay connected within a Sangat that valued had values similar to me. And then when I joined ADFA and I was learning certain leadership skills, when I got the opportunity to facilitate or take on, those junior leadership positions, whether it be Jatha leader or mentor at Sikh camps, gave me the opportunity to test them. So I wasn't just always testing my leadership skills in a military context. I got the opportunity, to try influence kids from 5 to 18. So I had a toolkit, and it gave me the opportunity to really develop it and refine it even further. And then as I look at it on the other side, I also think about how that community has been critical to me identifying and seizing these fleeting opportunities. So by being connected to the SYA Sangat, certain uncles and certain other kids in my generation have brought my attention to certain opportunities. For example, the John Monash Scholarship, or pursuing postings within the army, which will help me further on down the track and prove critical to achieving the scholarship. So, just sitting in the dining rooms, talking to the uncles or talking to the kids, and just through osmosis, taking on their ideas was, I think, critical to all the success I've had so far, and hopefully will continue to have.
Great. Can I just understand more about this Sir John Monash Scholarship that you're a recipient on? So is that available to people who are serving in the military? What does it entail?
No, so it's not a military scholarship. It's a it's open to all Australian citizens, and all it requires is, so there's a paper application and a couple of rounds of interviews, but what it requires is people who want to pursue academic excellence are able to demonstrate leadership skills and have a desire to give back to the community, to the Australian community. So that's what they're looking for when they select their scholars, and what it provides is $70,000 a year in funding to study overseas. But it's open to anyone who wants to apply as long as they're an Australian citizen.
Oh, it's wonderful. And so for your scholarship, what do you intend to do with it?
So I'm hoping to head over to the UK next month, mid-July, and complete my Masters in Business Administration at the London Business School. Fingers crossed.
Oh, well, hope you make it over there, given what's going on. So what about the MBA that you feel that could give you more training that you haven't already got from the Defence Force?
So there's a couple of reasons that immediately come to mind. The first one is understanding the private sector a lot better. So as I've worked in the Pacific, in nations like Papua New Guinea, Fiji, or even with Indigenous communities in Australia, I've come to realize that the private sector plays a critical role in the strategic objectives that the nation is pursuing. They have an ability to achieve effects as efficiently as possible. So as a leader within the army and hopefully within government one day, I need to have that commercial acumen to really bridge the sometimes divergent objectives of the private and public sector. And the way I saw that really coming was through further education. So that's how I want to become better at my job and hopefully give back to community. And the second reason I really want to head over to London to do it is the UK is by population is a very small country, but it punches well above its weight. So an opportunity to study how that nation and how that government works with the private sector to have an inflated impact gives me an opportunity to do it at the coalface, I guess.
That's really interesting. If I could circle back in terms of your role into the ADF. So in terms of you have a leadership role, you're a captain, you're an officer. So I guess the question that we have is, we got this abstract concept of leadership, right? It's leadership in a company. What does that mean? You can read a lot of books in Harvard Business Review or all these journals of what that means. But what does that look like to you? Like for someone who's coming from the context of being in an actual position of leadership of a group of men and women, sometimes in remote areas, what does good leadership look like to you?
That's a really good question. So I guess to me, leadership, I think the overall accepted definition is leadership is influencing or inspiring a group of individuals towards a shared goal. So what I think we all understand good leadership, but to me, we all understand in the sense that when we have a good leader, we're like, that he or she is awesome. But to me, I think what really defines a good leader is empathy. They're able to understand and empathize with their team members, their subordinates. And second is they are authentic and inspiring. So they understand you, and they may understand how uncomfortable certain things are and how fatigued you are, how tired you are. But they're still able to inspire you to be the best version of yourself. So those are, I think, being put on the spot. When I think of the good leaders that I've had the pleasure of understudying, those traits really came out to me. I felt like they cared about me, and I also wanted to be the best version of myself when I was working for them, to them, or near them.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a really good on-the-spot answer. Now, I did want to say, try to see another on-the-spot answer. If you could link that back to, the principles of Sikhi, where would you see that link of leadership and what you would have as someone, brought up, quite closely to our religion?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess I can talk about myself. So I've had like 5, 6 years at ADFA, RMC, or sorry, Royal Military College, kind of being constantly assessed and given feedback on my leadership style. And your leadership style, I've learned that your leadership style needs to nest. It needs to nest within who you are as a person. So if you're a laid back, chill individual, you can't just in a leadership position just turn it on and become someone else. You have to stay kind of within your natural bounds. So as I reflected on what kind of leader I would be, I'd always kind of look for certain traits in gurus or the Sikh leaders that came after the gurus periods. So like, for example, I'd look at Guru Nanak Dev Ji's moral courage, his ability to just test the status quo. So someone who didn't just take it for granted. Or who else comes to mind? Guru Gobind Singh Ji's, of course, physical courage, his concepts of tyar bar tyar, always ready for regardless of what challenges face you, being constantly developing your entire repertoire so you can react. You're not blindsided. And then if we come sooner along, someone who's really inspired me recently has been Jaswant Singh Kalra, and I guess just once again, it's just that moral courage, just his commitment to the truth, and he didn't back down, whether it be through pressure or physical threats. So I think what you can see there is I keep coming back to the idea of moral courage, and it's not to say I've perfected moral courage. It's where I think I need and I want to develop the most. So I look to these historical exemplars to give me that kind of internal strength, as a personal challenge of that's where you want to get to, Amrinder.
Right. Okay. That's wonderful. So have you, I suppose in your actual career, as a captain, you've been deployed, a lieutenant, then a captain. Could you perhaps talk about some leadership challenges, like real life that you might have encountered as part of your role that you'd like to speak about? How the training kind of prepared you for it?
Absolutely. So over the past 11 years, or really kind of 6 years after commissioning, I've had the opportunity to deploy on Operation Fiji Assist, which was after a tropical cyclone Winston in Fiji. I've had the opportunity to work in like remote parts of Australia and then further afield as well. I deployed to Iraq back in 2018. And two challenges I faced as a leader. I think I did one well, and I'll talk about one that still kind of stays in the back of my mind is I don't have the answer for. So the first one was in Fiji. The island of Koror had been completely devastated. So it's a real tropical island. There was no shade left on the nation, on that island. Everything had just been destroyed. Like I reckon 95% of buildings and homes, just rubble. So I personally had never seen that amount of devastation in my life. So, it was energizing. It intrinsically appealed to me. Yes, we were out there, we were helping these people rebuilding. And at night we'd play with the local kids. We'd play touch footy with them, as Fijians love their rugby. And then, just through hanging out with the kids, my soldiers we had ration packs. We were eating from our ration packs, which come with M&Ms and little chocolates. So what would I think in any other context, especially as young adults, it kind of, so rugby evolved into wrestling, which evolved into M&Ms were like being thrown in the air, and then the kids would wrestle each other for a packet of M&Ms. Yeah, innocent fun, but I definitely wouldn't pass the 60 minutes test because we're in a nation, we're helping these people, and we're kind of, the optics of making kids fight over food is just, it's not good. So I was, and like it's a very obvious decision to, okay, we need to stop this immediately, guys, which was the right decision. But why it was difficult, like why I dwelled on it, I think, was I was probably the second youngest person there. So it was my troop of 70, but I was the second youngest person there. So I didn't, you don't want to be a killjoy. You don't want to tread on any of the senior soldiers' toes, because even though I'm the officer, you can't just command by diktat. You still need to have these guys buy into the mission. So that was a challenge for me. I'm talking like a 2-minute challenge, but that one stays in the back of my mind always, of having that courage. But I saw myself kind of hesitating.
Right.
And then the second challenge, which I don't have the right answer for, but one that has stuck with me, is as a troop leader back in Australia. We had a very high tempo period coming back from Fiji, doing a bunch of army exercises. I had a couple of in my troop of about 25, 30. Had a couple of breakdown of marriages, i.e., divorces, and had one of my senior team leaders kind of I guess his discharge or have serious mental health issues as a result of his service in Afghanistan. And the reason this one sticks with me is I don't know what the right answer, what I should have done is. So yeah, I look at myself as a leader and like, was it a result of my decisions, of the high tempo that I forced down on my soldiers, on my troop? Was it a result of my behavior that I led to these friction in these three soldiers' lives, which led to mental health or breakdown of marriages? Could I have had a stronger backbone to my boss and fought a little bit harder to have these guys taken off exercises so they didn't spend 2 months down in Western Australia away from their families or away from their girlfriends? Or was this going to happen and all I could do as a leader was support these guys through their challenges? So this one always comes back to me just randomly as I'm walking around. But as a leader, I guess the point I'm just trying to make is it's a lonely position, the leader, but it's also when you really care about people, you don't know whether you make the right decision at the time, so it just stays with you. I hope that answered your question, Yadvir.
Yeah, it does actually. It kind of ties back a lot to what you said earlier about empathy, right? So I, from the outside, not myself ever served in the military, would have thought there would be very hierarchical, right? You do this right now. But even in positions what you're talking about, I think it transfers quite well to the commercial environment too, where people in leadership positions have to empathize with people below them in terms of rank. But even you have that mixture of age groups, right? And how do you go about approaching that? And people have challenges in their lives, personal challenges that affects their professional work. And what role do you have or don't have in terms of helping them through that as a leader? It's kind of a hard line to draw too, right? What you can do to them, what you can't do to them. All that's a factor.
So I guess two things come to mind as you said that. The first thing was, as I was a trainee, we're on this a claymore kind of a field exercise where you learn how to use the claymores that I'm sure people know from COD. But we were out there on the range, and this senior soldier or warrant officer said to us, he's just like, even though you're in the army, you can't rule by diktat. You can't just command people. You are to do this because I said so. He said, always ask first, then tell, and then if they still refuse, then you have to command, because yes, we're a military. We can't be polite all the time. Sometimes you have to pull rank and you have to get something done, but you should always ask. So it's always, you have to be polite, and you have to you never just go straight. You are to do this. And the second thing that came to mind was, as we now are leading a different generation of team members, the likes of Sikh Youth Australia, or in my case, working with Agal Fodge as well, gives me the opportunity to stay connected with people who aren't from my cohort. So you learn the new lingo, but you also learn how to talk and what the newer generation, the post 2000 Olympics kids in my mind, what they value. So you stay connected with them. But those were just random thoughts as you were talking.
Right. It's actually quite interesting that you put it there about ask, tell, command. You feel like you can translate that almost anywhere.
Yeah. And it's just a misconception about army, right? Everyone thinks army is just like, oh yeah, the senior officer, scissors, paper, rank always wins. But you can't do that day to day. We're still human beings, and need to influence and inspire people.
Right. And it comes to personality styles too, right? Some people are very direct. Other people are more laid back, as you mentioned, right? So you have to kind of like fit your leadership style to kind of match that as well. So you still inspire, I still emphasize, but you're still direct. You're still the one that ultimately has the responsibility to the people around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll flick to a quick question in the chat. We may have actually circled around this, but the question was, what has your work as a Sikh officer taught you about Sikhi? So I think we have circled around it, but I think they're looking for a more defined answer.
What is my work as an army officer taught me about Sikhi?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So looking for the other way around, I believe, from that one. Well, he's saying Sikh officer, but I think he'll see, sorry, I'm not sure. I just got the chat through, is looking at the reverse, right? So you have a lot of inspiration from Sikhi as an officer. Does it flow back the other way?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to try to answer this. I think maybe I might miss the mark, so I apologize. But if you need clarification, please let me know. I think the first thing so I found that there's a lot of ways to connect with Sikhi. So for me, as I was on my journey of figuring out who I was, I have a great respect for Gurmat Sangeet. I see a lot of creative artwork and the artistic way of connecting with Sikhi, which is very important. But Kirtan wasn't the way I really found my depth in Sikhi. I found it through our history, our itihas. So that has been the way that I was really able to appreciate our faith, was through an understanding of our history. Whether it be through our war history or whether it be through our advocacy or activism, that's how I've learned that there's some people like dal, some people like sabji, some people like just the paratha by itself, but there's so many different ways to connect with our faith. I hope that answers your question. That's what comes to mind immediately, but if it doesn't, I can try again later.
Sure. So I think a number of people that are dialing in or have family members, maybe considering career paths, right, at their age. So what advice would you give to fellow Sikhs that are looking for a career path into the ADF?
Sure. So to whoever's listening, if you're thinking about joining the Australian Defence Force, I would say 100% do it. If you're thinking about full-time, hell yes. If you're thinking about reservist, this is world according to Amrinder, is think about doing reservist or part-time military stuff outside what you do in your day-to-day. So if you're a lawyer, I wouldn't say do legal officer in the army. Maybe do an infantry officer or an infantry foot soldier. So do something that kind of gives you an opportunity to learn skills not immediately inside your day-to-day role. For those going back full-time, the Australian Defence Force Academy is a fantastic pathway straight after high school. You get the opportunity to move away from mum and dad. You get paid while you do it, no HECS debt. But most importantly, you get the opportunity to really develop as a young adult, and it's just amazing. But if you're past your advert time and you want to maybe switch careers, it's equally amazing to whether it be Australian Army, Navy, or Air Force. It gives you the opportunity, regardless of the service, to work on your leadership skills, but also in some really challenging environments and contexts. So, like flavor of the month right now is cyber, or it's the procurement of new massive fleets of ships and planes and vehicles. So that's for the people who want to join. Yes, hell yes. And you can contact me after. And if I can't help you, there's a very robust Defence Sikh network that I can put you in touch with, and someone will definitely be able to answer all your questions. To the parents, one thing I've realized, and I didn't realize it at my time, but I guess it needs to be said, is if your daughter is considering joining the Australian Defence Force, it's 100%, but safe. It is an excellent place for your daughter to work, to study at ADVA. And there's there's plenty of other women who currently and have gone through ADFA in the Air Force who can attest to what I'm saying. So it's, yeah, as a parent, you don't have anything to be worried about. And same goes for, I guess, regardless of male or female, is the Australian Defence Force is about defending Australia's interests and is I guess the invisible fist of government. So it does have a certain amount of risk involved in those operations, but because we're a nation of 25 million, the mentality of, just throw bodies at the problem, just use soldiers and meat shields is not within our organization. So lives aren't just thrown away willy-nilly. Every soldier, airman, seaman is taught to, I'd argue, one of the highest levels in the world. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and actually the part you brought about women being safe in ADFA is very important, because on the news over the years you did hear different stories and such forth, right? But sounds like someone's gone through it. The environment's definitely changed and improved to ensure that if you're looking at your daughter or a cousin going through the Defence Force Academy, that's a really safe environment for them to learn and grow.
Absolutely. Yeah. I immediately I think about 10 women that come to mind immediately that are currently in uniform serving every day. About 2 to 3 officers, and the remainder are soldiers all around Australia.
Okay. I'll take another question from the audience here. So for people considering a career in the Army, what was the biggest obstacle you've encountered? And what was something unexpected about the experience that you wish you knew when you started?
Okay, I can talk about my biggest obstacle, and it's also what I wish I knew when I started. So, man, when I finished high school, I had got I wish I'd learned how to tie a bug properly. I remember doing the first parade after, the initial training, and Shub, who was 1 year ahead of me, tied my bug for me because I didn't know how to tie it. So for the youngins, definitely worthwhile knowing how to tie your bug and tying it quickly. And, jokes aside, tying it quickly is important because in those training institutions, you're always time poor. So you want to, you never want to be the last person. You always want to be, in that top third of your cohort, and you never want to be the straggler. So, that's something I wish I was better at. But I think an equally serious challenge for people who want to join the Army, and I'm just going to assume the person who asked has a beard thicker than mine. That's a low bar, but I think there's certain challenges about having a dadi, keeping it day to day, and as we move into a greater, it's called CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear kind of threat environment. The gas masks and fighting with gas masks on is going to become more important. So as I trim my beard, it's not as big a threat. Not a big challenge for me because I'm still able to get the seal through the beard onto the skin. But those who have the dadi, I think we need to work on a solution. I think right now Vaseline, I've been told, is the solution, but food for thought.
Okay, that's interesting. Also, I think on our meeting we had like a few weeks ago, you also spoke about the challenges of swimming.
Yes.
Across the pool.
Yeah, growing up in Western Sydney, you don't really have many you don't have much access to water. So my swimming skills were definitely not up to scratch. So yeah, I think it goes without saying, make sure you can learn how to swim 100 meters. You have to learn to, as an engineer, our swim test is you have to swim 100 meters in uniform with your boots on, those heavy boots, and then you have to tread water for five minutes. So if you want to challenge yourself, maybe you can set that as your baseline. But that's one of the harder ones in the Army swim test wise. The base is like 25 meters in 2 minutes of treading water, but I was able to survive 100 meters and survive 5 minutes. So if I can do it, I'm sure anyone else can.
Right. We'll go into some more user questions, audience questions. So the questions about interesting books, actually. What are you reading right now that helps you feel inspired Do you have the time to even read, basically? Does it require that sacrifice, given how busy you would be, no doubt?
Yeah. So I love reading, and it's only something I fell in love with after I finished uni. So I only started reading back in 2014, and I've been trying to play catch up since then. Right now, I'm reading The Dynamics of Sikh Revolution by Jagjit Singh, and on audiobook, I'm listening to Invisible Women, How Big Data Affects Women. And oh man, it is so inspiring, especially the Invisible Women one. I guess coming back to the concept of Tyar Bar Tyar, I try not to just read military history. I try not to read just engineering stuff. That would be pretty boring, I think, the engineering stuff. But military history is fascinating. But the women one, I just didn't know kind of how many blind spots I had regarding just how society's set up to help us as men. So I think straight away I can apply what I'm learning to one, how I lead a male and women, a man and woman team, but secondly also how as an engineer, I guess hopefully in future a decision maker of buildings, how I can also implement this into the everyday design of buildings. So that one's sticking with me. But the other question was, how do I find time to read? So I've started this new thing where from 9:30 to 10, I read the paperback. So that's my wind down of no technology, and I audiobook when I'm at the gym or when I'm driving. So it becomes like hey, if you go to the gym, you get to listen to this book. So those are like my main windows. Or when I'm riding my bike to work.
Okay.
So in transit or at the gym.
And just a follow-up question to that one. What's your favorite? Well, there's two questions. One's a serious question. One's probably a joke. The serious question is, what's your favorite military history book? And the second is, what's your favorite engineering book?
My favorite military history book would have to be Defeat into Victory. Defeat into Victory is by Field Marshal Slim. So he led part of the British Indian Army, I would say, in the fight in Burma against the Japanese. So the reason I enjoyed that is he talks about the Sikh soldiers, he talks about Indian soldiers. You're like, oh yeah, they're my people. But the way he writes is very humble, very introspective, and he shows a lot of respect for the Japanese. He wasn't, they weren't just the enemy. He shows an appreciation for what they did and why they were successful and why he got absolutely hammered. And then he shows how he took his defeat, learned from it and turned it into victory. So I really enjoyed that. And my favorite engineering book would be Engineering in Emergencies. And that's a serious answer because I used that book in Fiji to, figure out how to quickly conduct structural analysis of some of the schools and medical facilities, because I had no idea. Like I was like a bulimic civil engineer learner, so I'd before an exam study it up, and then after I was done, vomit it out on the exam paper and move on. So engineering in emergencies was super helpful because I was able to go back to fundamentals, do a quick structural analysis, and also some of the other, as it says, in emergencies, what construction techniques can you use?
Right. That's a good answer. So we got another question from the audience. Have you encountered any difficulties with the Sikh identity in the Australian Army? This was concern for people in the United States. Do Australian service people have the same issues?
So with the Sikh identity, as I said earlier, in the formal kind of dress manual, this, that, and the other, those were ironed out in the 2012s. There was like one or two lines that kind of made it sound like we had to take a bugger off on parade and wear the hat. Mm-hmm. But that was quickly the KFF, they call it, the khaki fur felt hat. But they were quickly ironed out. That was just a line that could be misunderstood. So formally, no. Informally, there are still challenges. So for someone like me who's educated in Australia, so I've since kindergarten, all that, I found it challenging as I spoke around the post 9/11 world, where you don't face malicious racism. It's more ignorance veiled under banter. So I always struggled with that because, like you hear jokes of, terrorists, what's under your pag or patka. You hear all this, and you know that the person saying it, comparing you to the Taliban, isn't trying to deliberately hurt your feeling or insinuate that you're a bad guy, but it still tugs your heartstrings because you're like, oh man, I'm on the same team as you. I'm going through equal amounts of hardship. I'm sacrificing as much as you are, but still to be compared to, at that time, the foe. That like it still hurts.
Yeah.
So it still is a challenge, but it's nowhere near as prevalent as it was when I was going through training. But to answer your second one, to also answer it. So there's a lot of Sikhs who are now joining, both male and female, who are joining after having migrated to Australia, done the student visa, got their citizenship, and then now they want to serve the nation, which is amazing. But they don't have the soft skills or the English skills that you and I are blessed with. So they're facing a unique set of challenges of navigating the Australian Army, the Australian Defence Force with their English with their English skills, but also their kind of cultural understanding of what is banter, what is acceptable and unacceptable behaviour. So when they I guess approach me for help and stuff like that, I'm noticing a trend that this group of servicemen and women need help in that regard. So there's those challenges for those newer migrants.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine how hard it is, even though that you appreciate there being good bantered about it. It's a challenge where you're in together. You're probably in a hostile environment in terms of who you cup and dress. I'm not sure what the real solution to that is in terms of this is stuff that YSPN does in general, is promoting Sikhs and Sikh leadership so that people understand what is a Sikh, why are we wearing a turban, who are we about, what are we about, what are our values, where do we stand, and sort of giving that to the general public, the Australian public. Because we still, we've encountered in our webinars and other events that, people come up to us and said, oh, look, I'm a Sikh with a turban, and people still ask me all the time, who are you, what are you about? So there's still it's not that quite that cut through quite, you need, I think, publicly, to like who we're about. We're still quite small and niche and a bit out of the main eye, perhaps compared to places like England or Canada, where we're more prominent in positions. Of course, you have I think the Defence Minister of Canada, I think that's position, or Secretary of Defence, whatever they call it, is a Sikh, as an example. So someone quite prominent, right, in those positions.
Yeah, so I think just two things that, as you were talking, that came to mind. So as I spoke about moral courage earlier, and the reason it kind of stays with me is because I reflect on these moments of when you hear these kind of, I think, bigoted remarks. You just like, I reflect, I'm like, man, I mean, you should have said something to kind of stop it then. Or do you stop every person that says it? Or do you, as you cop it, do you just give some back as well? Like, so that kind of stays with me. Is like, I mean, did you not say anything because you were scared, or did you not say anything because you're like, you can't be bothered fighting every single person of this thing? But as you said about, Harjit Sanjan, and we don't have those role models. I see, I guess what inspires me in this situation is, leaders nahi hage, blah, 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 is Guru Gobind Singh Ji was, wise enough to give us all this uniform that of the Dastar, of the Kes, of the Kakars, to always have us stand out. So by all of us standing out, we're always ambassadors for the Panth, right? We're always there representing as the face, as a spokesman for all, I don't know, 22 million of us. Mm-hmm. So that energizes me. Internally, it's a check. You have to make sure you live up to those standards and you represent the community well. But it also gives me any opportunity to also teach others that, it doesn't mean you go out and you preach Sikhi 24/7. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, when people ask me, when they just look at my bug, oh, can I ask a question? I'm like, yes, of course, you can ask. I don't get offended when people ask any silly question. It's just this is an opportunity to actually just teach people I don't get, so I treat as anything as an opportunity to just showcase Sikhi.
Absolutely. Yeah. We do have a question that kind of cycle back to earlier you mentioned about students, people that migrated here and joined the Defence Force. So it's for students making a choice about what to do in the future, what we tell them about joining the armed services relative to pursuing a civilian career. So yeah, how do you feel in terms of the students that have already come through in your experience, that people that came on student visas joined the military? Do you feel that's been a really good outcome for them and something that more students should take up when they come to Australia?
I think so, yes. So recently, and the reason I say this, recently, I guess inspired by the work of YSPN as well, is we set up the Defence Sikh Network, to as a community work together. So it's not just, it's ADF, so the three services, as well as the Australian Public Service Sikhs as a kind of Department of Defence group, so we can help navigate these challenges. And I think there's at least 170 uniformed personnel. And when it comes to the challenges that and the people that have needed help, I reckon only 3 or 4 of them have faced issues. So, that's maybe 2-3% of Sikhs so far that I've engaged in have faced real issues that need help. So when it comes to a career and will there be challenges, I wouldn't expect those major challenges of systemic racism and stuff like that. That's not the problem. The reason I really love the service life is you get the opportunity to interact with every form of Australian, because every form of Australian joins the military, whether they want a future in politics or they just want to be a truck driver for the rest of their life, whether they're from Northern Territory or from the inner city suburbs of Melbourne. You get the opportunity to meet every form of Australian. You also get the opportunity to move around and kind of see which city you also want to live in. We get I grew up in Sydney, and I definitely think of Sydney as home, but I have had the opportunity to see Brisbane, Darwin, and Melbourne, and Canberra as well. So you also get the opportunity to kind of see all of Australia and figure out in the long term where you potentially want to live.
Sure.
And finally, it's the skills. You get tangible skills that are recognized by the wider civil industry. So, and I'll just give you an example. So let's say you came to Australia as a horticulturalist or a cook, and you don't want to be a chef for the rest of your life. You can join the Australian Army as an electrician, get a proper trade for work for 6 years, and then if you want to move into civilian life, then you also have, not only do you have your cookery degree, but you also have an electrician qualification that you can immediately apply.
Yeah. Actually ties back to 2 other questions, actually, what you brought up there. One was the movement, right, around the country. Now, it can be a benefit, but it could be a drain, right, and your family in terms of that challenge. So how have you and your family dealt with that in terms of you being away for periods of time and coming back?
I like to tell myself that distance makes the heart grow fond. So maybe people like me more when I'm not around all the time. But no. In all seriousness, it's a challenge. And ever since I got married to Happy a couple of years ago, 1.5 years ago, like I was just thinking, on our 2nd anniversary, we're going to be living in our 4th home. So we lived in Sydney, moved to Melbourne for a year, Canberra, and now we're going to be in London on our 2nd anniversary. So it does get challenging, but I think that kind of posting history is more towards the extreme. On average, as an officer, you expect to move around every 2 years. So you get 2 years in a city and then you move. And as a soldier, you get lower end is 3, and then higher end can be, your whole career. So it definitely has its stresses, packing up, losing staff, etc., and making new friends and stuff like that stresses. But it also has values. It also has a lot of benefits where you get to see the world, and make new friends, as I've already harped on about a bit.
Sure. And we'll round out one of the questions with it involves racism. So the question was around to do with Ben Roberts-Smith involving civilians. Of course, as we know, what's going on there in the courts. But the question goes back to in terms of racism. I think you've answered this before, but have you encountered racism and how you've dealt with it?
Um, so as I said, I, yes, I have, but I never took it as, malicious, like someone's trying to hurt my feelings, someone's trying to ostracize me, etc., etc. It was just poor banter. And I don't know, like I'll let you decide, even the listeners decide whether this is racism. But an example that comes to mind is I was in Darwin just as a cadet, lined up in the mess. The mess is where you get your food, the canteen.
Mhm.
And they had the US Marines there. And one of my colleagues, one of my friends was lined up behind the colleague. So I was in I was in uniform in a tan patka lined up. And one of the Marines said to the other, "Oh, look at that guy." And the second guy's like, "Oh yeah, he's one of those." He's like, "Oh, what's that on his head? He must be like one of those Afghani hipsters." So those kinds of discussions happen behind your back, maybe more pernicious. I don't know if that's racism or not, but you
Mhm.
definitely stand out. You're definitely very different to the buzz-cutted soldiers. You're already brown, already got facial hair, and I got the starter, but gone. So it's already different, and you stick out. But I've never found it as malicious racism.
Sure.
And in that case, like, what can you do? You could just like, oh yeah, I haven't heard that one before.
Right. Well, this way it could come back to and having more prominent people in leadership positions, right? So, in terms of Sikhs in the ADF and other diverse people, right? I get the impression there's quite a lot of diversity in the officer ranks, but what I can see from the outside is you get up to what is the what we call senior leadership positions. So the star ranks of the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy. It seems quite homogenous to me. So basically, the question is, what are the situations we need to enable people of backgrounds such as ours to get to the star ranks in the future? So they're in these true leadership positions at the heads of these branches of the Defense Force.
Yeah, yeah, man, that's a very good question. So naturally, I'm inclined to say we just need time to get there because naturally it takes time to progress anyway. But I think as hopefully more and more of our youth just think about a career of service, and so as we develop within our community this kind of understanding and soft knowledge of progressing within military ranks, they can climb on the shoulders of their predecessors. So let's assume I get to major, and that's where I decide I want to move into, I want to serve in some other way. At least they have that amount of knowledge through my experiences to help them get there even quicker, and then they can bounce up and then bounce up. So I think it's a matter of time,
Mhm.
but I can genuinely say I don't think there's any impediments based on our identity. I think that a lot of it's going to be performance based.
Okay, so you don't feel there's any glass ceiling there as such,
No, 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 no. I
right?
don't think so.
Okay, well, I'm going to segue here to what also could help is our YSPN mentoring program. So our mentoring program has launched. The applications close 1 week from now. So you can apply online at yspn.org/mentoring. So if you need help in career planning, public speaking, effective communication, entrepreneurship, or other professional service skills, and perhaps you can get a mentor one day that can take you to the star ranks of the military. Join the mentoring program and check out our socials. Also should highlight that we've got a workshop in Perth coming up on the 29th of June to do, it's around racism and dealing with racism. So the panel discussion open to that. We also have an event coming up in Brisbane that will be released in socials in the upcoming weeks, but keep your eyes peeled for a physical event. And finally, we do have the biggest event of the year, Elevate 2021, which is our third national annual conference. So we bring together Sikhs, prominent Sikhs from across Australia and New Zealand as a big day national conference. That'll be held in early September. So keep your eyes peeled on all of that as well. So I'd just like to thank Amrinder Singh Ghuman so much for joining us on this webinar today. I've learned a great deal about leadership, about actually having a viable career path in the military as well, for not only people that were born and raised here, but even people that have migrated and looking for that, and understanding the environment that's very supportive for migrants, for people of different backgrounds, ensure that they're very successful. So thanks so much, and everyone please give them a shout out in the chat.
Thanks, Yadvir. Much appreciated. If anyone now or in the future just needs has any questions or follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm only here because many people were selfless in the help they gave me. So it's my duty to pay it forward to anyone.
All right, great. I guess they can connect with you on LinkedIn, if possible, if you need to like ask questions about military careers and such forth.
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn or my email is amrinder.singh.ghuman@outlook.com.
Okay, fantastic. Well, it leaves it there. So thanks so much for everyone for dialing in to all our guests and the questions you've had. And thanks again to our guest. Everyone, have a great day.